The Haunting of Hill House is the greatest, smartest, most well thought out show ever made. If you've seen the show before, you know that there are 5 of the Crane children, and each of those children represents a different stage of grief. The first stage of grief is denial, and this is represented by Steve Crane. If you've seen the show, I think this is a very blatantly obvious one. The whole show, Steve is in denial about the supernatural events that took place in the house. He just thinks that his mom and Nell were both suffering mental illness, and that his dad basically enabled them the whole time. And even when he is literally confronted with Nell's ghost in his apartment, he still denies everything. Until the very end, when he is confronted by all the spirits in the house and has no choice but to believe it. The second stage of grief is anger, and that's represented by Shirley. One of the plot lines of the show is how Steve became a famous author by using the story of Hill House and their mother. And throughout the whole show, Shirley is so angry with Steve for exploiting their mother and their story. She also expresses how she's angry at Nell for committing suicide after what happened to their mother. She also gets incredibly angry at Theo and her husband. And really it ends up that she has just a bunch of pent-up guilt about a specific situation. The third stage of grief is bargaining, and that is represented by Theodora Crane, my favorite character of all time. She wears her gloves so she can't feel anything until she wants to. She kind of rationalizes all of the events that took place in the house and what happened to Nell. And then in the end, after she touches Nell's body, she starts to not be able to feel anything, which leads to that scene with her and Shirley's husband where she is literally just pleading and bargaining to feel anything. The fourth stage of grief is depression, and that's represented by Luke. Luke obviously is struggling with the drug addiction, using that as a coping mechanism to deal with all of his trauma. And he definitely takes Nell's death the hardest, being her twin. He makes comments saying, like, I don't know how I can go on without you. Depression is usually the longest and hardest part of grief. So that's why we see so much of Luke struggle over such a long period of time. And finally, the fifth stage of grief is acceptance, and that is represented by Nell. Nell finally realizes that the bent neck lady, or this ghost that she's been haunted by her whole life, has been her all along, and she kind of accepts her fate. She goes back to the house where she's reunited with her mom, and even after she dies, she still comes back to help her siblings in their time of need and forgives them all. And she, being that final stage, gives them all closure and essentially frees them all from all their trauma and grief from the house. Now, this is a theory that circulated when the show just came out. I'm honestly not sure if Mike Flanagan has ever spoken about it. However, when the BuzzFeed article about it got released, he did share the article and said, "Good catch." So I think that was very much intended.